Great. Thank you, Maddie. Appreciate that and welcome. So the playbook for 2026, I recognize that we're not yet in 2026, but I want to prepare all of you for here's what AI is going to look like in 2026. But as a cheat code, you can obviously take some of these learnings and ideas and start applying them today. There's nothing that needs to stop you from that. I'll begin this with the reality of AI in Treasury. If anyone's ever seen me present AI, you'll know that I always begin with what's our future really look like when it comes to AI. And there's a couple of assertions that I make most presentations that I do on AI. Everyone will have AI. Now, is everyone going to have it in 2026? Maybe yes, maybe no, probably no. But more people every single month, every single year will be adopting AI in Treasury. So the second statement is really the one that matters for us within the office of the CFO and certainly within Treasury specifically. People with AI will replace people without AI. There is no wait and see. There is no, I'm not sure about this. There is exploring opportunities, because if I kind of jump to the bottom of this, data, we all know, is the most valued asset. It's the most valuable asset. Making data-driven decisions is paramount to how we succeed in Treasury for a lot of different reasons. And really, I like to make this statement: there is no AI strategy without a data strategy. Data matters, and AI thrives off that data. Now, if we're thinking of realities and being practical about this, every time I talk about AI, whether it's in a single conversation, whether it's on the airplane, sitting next to someone, whether it's at home with my kids, what's the biggest thing? Trust. Trust is the biggest problem. It's the single biggest barrier to why all of us are not using AI within Treasury today. So I want to touch on really all of those things in terms of what is AI going to look like when I say something like everyone's going to have AI, people with AI will replace those without. What does that really mean? What can we actually do to become part of the people with AI and Treasury? And then I really do want to touch on trust and how we get around that, how you can work both with your peers, with your partners, with IT, with auditors. There's a variety of different constituents that can help solve that. Trust is the biggest concern issue. So let's kind of look at our current state. What is AI today in 2025? Before I start talking though, Maddie's gonna be kind enough to throw up this polling question. You can see it on the slide and then it'll pop up on the screen so you can actually click and answer. The question is, do you use AI in Treasury today? And there's a couple of different answers, some more entertaining than others, but it boils down to, yeah, IT's given us approval. Yes, our Treasury systems have AI features, which will be two different things. Almost, we're experimenting. Someone might, but it's not me, or not yet, but open to thinking differently after today's presentation. Maddie, for my benefit, because I'm sharing screen, I actually can't see the results from people. So if you could give me a quick readout of where everyone landed. I have my suspicions, but I welcome the input.
Yeah, it looks like 36% said yes, IT has given us approval for AI tools that we use. 28% almost. We're experimenting with a few options, and 13 and 17% for yes, our Treasury teams have AI features embedded that we use, and then 17% not yet, but maybe after today.
But maybe. I love the optimism. Maybe after today. And that's a great way to think about it. So look, IT's given us some tools. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. I just wanted to make sure that it was the largest response, which I kind of thought it was going to be, so that we're in a position to talk to what most of your real life experience is today. So knowing all of that, thank you for the answers. Let's progress to what is AI really? Like when we talk about it, what is it? I've used this slide for a long time. But interestingly enough, for anyone that's ever seen me present even last year at this event or other industry events as well, I have to make changes to this, give or take, like every couple of months, because it's a moving target and it continues to push as new advancements in AI come about. What we need to care about in Treasury are really these four things. There's rules-based automation. I put in parentheses so there's no confusion. That's not AI. Programmatic things where you can say, if this, then this, right? Our typical Excel if then functionality or VLOOKUP kind of like that capability. It's not AI, but it plays a role as we get to this concept of agentic, which I'm going to talk about in a moment. So there's a role for this level of automation, but it's not AI. It's not intelligent. It's not learning from it. It's not identifying certain exceptions. It's really just doing what you told it to do. Machine learning, it's our original AI that we certainly saw in finance, and it offers a level of predictability. So I use that word intentionally. It really helps identify and find exceptions. Now, those exceptions might be, and I'll show a slide in a couple moments about quarantine payments, like looking for payment fraud. That's a good example of finding exceptions. Here's the payments you typically do. Here's an exception to that typical behavior. Let's push that out and have another look at that. Identifying exceptions in terms of historical bank transactions or cash flows to help you predict with certain patterns, identify those patterns, and being able to identify, here's what my forecast should be based on these edge cases and understanding their role in our past cash behavior and hence our future forecasting. So that's where machine learning comes in. There's a variety of examples, but generally it's taking mass data sets, structured data, if we want to call it that, and taking those mass data sets and being able to find some sort of meaning, predictability, or exceptions within those data sets. And that's what machine learning does. It's a great tool. Just because it's been around for a few years doesn't mean there's anything wrong with it. It continues to play a role and will continue to play a role for Treasury solutions using AI. Generative AI, we all know this, right? What's an example of Gen AI? If you could all talk back to me, you would say, oh, ChatGPT. And in fact, ChatGPT, OpenAI, the vendor behind ChatGPT, continues to be in the news, even as recently as today, doing a big deal with NVIDIA to stay relevant and have more computing power, maybe further divorcing themselves from Microsoft Alliance. Point being, we all use ChatGPT. If we had a fun polling question, Maddie, if I thought of this one as a polling question, how many or how much or what percentage, I should say, of the world's population uses ChatGPT? And many of you, unless you've seen this before, might be shocked to know it's 10%, 700 million plus users of ChatGPT globally, which is significant. So Gen AI is pretty popular, is the short version, the conclusion point on that. And Gen AI is starting to permeate within tools that we have within finance today. Of the 36% of you that said AI has given us some tools, these are most likely Gen AI tools. Maybe ChatGPT Enterprise as an example. Maybe it's Claude from Anthropic. Maybe it's Llama from Meta or Prophet from Meta, are all examples of different tools that can be acquired from big names, like big third parties that are all recognizable names, and potentially implemented in Treasury use cases. Most of it is generally conversational. You ask it a question, you get an answer. And that obviously is a significant role for us in Treasury, where we are asked and have to answer questions every single day. Sometimes we're asking it, such as, I've been on vacation for 2 weeks. I do not remember how to implement and enter a payment. What are my instructions? What's the checklist that I need to go through? These are great uses of Gen AI alongside a simple question like, how much exposure do I have to the euro? How many bank accounts do I have in Australia? Wonderful questions that deserve immediate and easy answers. So that's Gen AI, which we'll explore again a little bit more. Agentic AI tends to be a little bit more confusing for people. The simple way I like to decompose this is take the IC off of agentic, because that doesn't help anything. Agent. An agent is a task. A task is by nature actionable, and this is what agentic AI is. It's allowing you to stitch together different agents, aka tasks, stitch together these tasks in some sort of sequence. And I'm going to show you an example in a few moments in terms of what some of those would be. But I'm sure in the questions, many of you will have other ideas like, what about this? Could I run my whole daily cash process? Could I run my whole hedging process? The answer is, yep, you could. And that's what it is. So any workflow, any process, any sequence of tasks, that's what agentic AI is. It doesn't mean AI has to do everything. It means that you will pick and choose which tasks AI does and which tasks humans do. And as a result, you will create a process that maybe is a hybrid of people decision-making and AI decision-making that works for you. and works for your treasury organization. Agentic AI, in many cases, will take Gen AI components, machine learning components, and this is why the rules-based was important, and rules-based automation components, and create a workflow composed of those different tasks. And that's what agentic AI is. So there's lots of things, lots of noise about this. You Google agentic AI, you will get so many answers, some of which contradict each other. But the simple version is it allows you to have some actionability and automation through stitching together multiple tasks. Run my daily process is a perfect example. So let's decompose these a little bit more, because that's a nice explanation, but seeing is believing. So let's go through a little bit more detail. If we look at this is a simple use case for quarantining payments to strengthen the controls around your payment journey. I had actually earlier today, because for me it's Wednesday. If you're all watching live, then it's also Wednesday for you. I did a webinar with Swift this morning, and we talked about quarantining payments as part of that securing your payment journey. So that payment journey, simply speaking, this is that you have a whole payment history. Here's all the payments that I've done over the past, let's just say 12 months. That's the payment history that you see at the top of this diagram. Then you have a new payment and you are testing it against that payment history. That's all that's happening. And the brain part, and forgive the poor visualization, but that's kind of what it looks like. That brain part, that's the AI. And what does it do? All you want it to do is find the things that are different, find the anomalies that I need to have another look at. So the alert, the actionability, if you will, and this is kind of where you get there's an individual machine learning task, find the exception. The agentic part, if you will, is creating a process around, well, what do I do with that? Who gets to approve that now? If it's over a certain amount, do I have AI figure out who's the right person to approve this? Is this a scenario where maybe the initiator of that payment shouldn't be the one that reviews it, because we want to make sure that they didn't enter in a fraudulent payment? There's a lot of conditions, some of which might be rules-based, some of which might be AI-driven. But you, as a treasury professional, will create a process around this AI function, and that's taking a simple AI function and then building it into an agentic process. So alert and action, in many people's cases, it's quarantine that, have another look at it, go through a checklist of, let's say, conditions and validations to ensure that this is actually an okay payment, and away it goes. Or we actually take different action because we recognize this is not an approved payment that aligns with our payment policy. So great example of machine learning alongside other AI capabilities. Cash forecasting. Can't go in a presentation about AI without have to talk about cash forecasting. So again, pattern-based recognition. There's a couple of different AI use cases for forecasting, but the simplest one is train the AI model on every bit of data that you have. Here's all my historical cash flows. Here's where they started. Here's where they changed. Here's how they reconciled versus actual bank transactions. Take your prior cash flows, train the model so it knows what typically happens. It knows how you deal with exceptions. It knows where the variances were. All of that helps train the model to predict, here's what next might look like in terms of future cash flows. Super simple example conceptually. Obviously, there's some work behind the scenes. And in the end, what we have found anyway, and just speaking specifically on our side and with customers that have adopted this, is that it gets pretty darn close. And sometimes, in many cases, outperforms previous models. So that's a good thing. But again, I'm going to kind of put a pin on that one for a second. Using it kind of gets into the trust. And I want to touch on that trust a little bit more. So let's just kind of hold this point by saying, there's a use case for forecasting. How do I trust it? Let's come back to that. Now, here's another example of use case. This is more of a Gen AI one, using like embedded chat or embedded LLM within your treasury system. I would imagine, even though 36% of you said that IT is giving you some tools, they probably didn't say, just use the free version of ChatGPT, train it with our sensitive treasury information. Sure, it'll be fine. It's never how that conversation goes, because there's obviously controls around it. So making sure, and again, we'll touch on this in the trust section, you ask your approved LLM what you want to know. So this would be trained on both your data, but also your process, and also things like, how do I use the treasury management system or the ERP or whatever you're utilizing to manage things like fraudulent transactions or cash management and forecasting. The idea is that it's as simple as ask what you want to know. Ask it a question, it gives an answer. Just like if you have a vacation coming around the corner, or you're going to AFP conference in Boston in next month, and you're like, what should I do? Where should I go? Where should I go in the North End in Boston to eat great lobster ravioli? Which is a great question to ask AI, by the way. In a treasury context, these are the sorts of things that you would want to ask as well. So that's the use case, is making sure that from a treasury standpoint, you have the ability to work with those LLMs securely, of course, in a similar way as you might ask it to plan your vacation or your next trip. Now, let's kind of consider the more complicated one, because those are easy ones. If we think of building your own AI journey, this really gets to the heart of what I talked about for agentic AI. And that's where this is an example of just a payment journey. Right? You start with ERP, Treasury, internal payroll example. They start somewhere, a bunch of things happen, and then in the end, the payment is sent to the bank, or some cases non-banks, if we're looking at, say, stable coins or something like that. So all of these different things that happen, the beauty of agents or tasks, but I'm going to call them agents for today, for agentic AI process. Each of these bullet points, and in fact, maybe other bullet points too, but in this example, each of these bullet points can be an AI task, an AI agent. So if you're looking at things like format transformation, you're looking at which connection should it go through? Should I send this through API? Should I send it through Swift? Can I do file transfer? If those are all different choices available to you. If it's a French bank, do I send it through eBix? These are choices us in Treasury are kind of more head spinning sometimes, especially around the connectivity side. What's the format I need? Do I need to make an update to this particular version of Pane 001 for an XML format? These are examples at the top of this slide that are sometimes difficult for us in Treasury because we don't know. So AI can know. And as a result, sometimes you might find that there's certain agents that can help make those decisions for you, or at least those recommendations, with the final decision point being you as a person. If you look at different payment controls, now I'm going towards the bottom left of the slide, looking at how many approvals should this payment have. That could be rules-based, but it can also be AI-based and take into account other considerations. Do I need digital signatures? Do I need multi-factor authentication because I have to send it through Swift? These are examples of capabilities and automation and decisions that can be brought forth by AI. Hey, as a reminder, you need to add this in terms of sending this particular payment, would be a great example for AI. So there's a lot there. On the governance side, the bottom right, there's definitely a lot there. This is a difficult area for most Treasury organizations because what we manage in Treasury and what our friends in AP manage in terms of more bulk payments are usually very different processes, very different sets of connections and obviously numbers of payments, et cetera. There's a lot of different considerations. So I'm going to say just organizationally, having this payment policy driven by, or at least enforced by AI can absolutely be an opportunity. And some of you may look at this and say, there's no way I'm letting AI touch that. I don't trust it yet. Fair point. We will come to that because that's a very reasonable objection. But the possibility is there that you could have AI perform the fraud detection. AI go and call the API to go, say, look for Swift as an example, or LexisNexis, whoever the provider might be, go screen it against these sanction lists that are supported in this app that we have a connectivity to. Same thing with bank account verification, same thing with IBAN validation. If it's a single payment and it's one that's maybe more critical level, maybe I want to run it through Swift's Fin Plus instead of a file act channel. Again, I know that seems very detailed semantics, but the point is that these are some of the considerations that in Treasury are complicated, very detail oriented, and also very conditional that sometimes make it hard for us to ensure that we're doing all the right things in the checklist. So AI can help with the checklist, and that really is that I guess enabling or empowering you to finish that checklist, to automate that checklist. That's the opportunity that agentic AI brings. So if you think checklist, a lot of things, AI, you're absolutely thinking the right way about this. Now, that's a whole bunch of There's lots of opportunities. There's lots of technology out there. It's evolving daily, weekly, monthly, certainly quarterly, year over year. It's a very different landscape in terms of the availability of these technologies. Let's talk about how to make AI a reality. So I'm going to tell you about all the things, all the reasons why this can't work for you and how we get around those objections, because I think that's the real point. Every time I have these conversations with people, as I said, in a variety of different formats, it's always, but I need this in order to make AI a reality. We're going to talk about what this is for each of you. Now, before we do that, Maddie, you're going to help me out with this one, because I do want to know a little bit from all of you. What do you need in order to use AI? This is going to drive the rest of our conversation. So, number one, I need to trust AI. Fair point. IT needs to provide us AI tools. For 64% of you, that may be the answer. Our Treasury systems need to support AI, potentially quite useful. I'm not even sure where to start, very reasonable. Or all of the above, which no one would say no to that, I am sure. So I don't want to lead the audience, Maddie, but I'm going to guess that lots of people say all of the above. Would I be?
Yeah, you are correct. We're at about 52% are saying all of the above. Next highest is standalone. IT needs to provide us with the AI tools.
Yeah, they do. I agree with this. I also think there's an element of vendor responsibility in this as well. Obviously, being on a vendor side, I would think that, but I think there is a combination of things. So appreciate that feedback, Maddie. That's what I'm going to use to talk about this very next slide. So let's talk about the AI trust gap. This 80%, it actually comes from a survey that we did with our clients. It might even not just been our customers, but it certainly was our customers as a big part of that sample size. And I'm rounding up a little bit. It was like 79 something percent of CFOs, and I'm not just talking Treasury, but CFOs, were concerned about security and privacy of AI as a reason that they have not adopted AI yet across their teams. Doesn't mean there might not be pockets of little innovation here and there, but the reality is that there's a lot of organizations that just say, I'm not sure yet. Now, I look at a number like this and I think, what were the other 20% thinking? Because I don't know anyone, and I've never met anyone in person or in mass presentations or in webinars that said, no problem, we're not concerned for 1 second. We've got it all figured out. It's all great. We're good to go. There might be people that are thinking, I'm still a little concerned, but we are going to find a way around those. But 80%, I argue should be 100%, are concerned about security and privacy of AI. And that's one of the reasons that they have not fully adopted AI everywhere in their organization. So let's decompose why. It's really these three things. And I'm going to give you my opinion of what those answers should be. It may be different for your organization and certainly the data that you're working with. But number one, is it only my data that trains the AI model? 99% of the time, my opinion is this should be yes, is the answer you'd be looking for. 1% of the time, and I'll tell you what that exception is, because it's one that I've thought about for a while, and I've heard a lot of validation of this. I think all of us would kind of love the idea of bank fees were a benchmark that was across organizations so we could get visibility into what that looked like. That's a reasonable carve out. But for the most part, when we're trying to do anything, we want it to be our data and only our data. And for those that have AI policies within your organization, which I suspect is most of you, then you're going to be asked the same question. You say, can I use this AI tool within my ERP as an example? First question is going to be, well, whose data is training the model? And that's a great question to ask. It should be a yes answer almost every time. How does the AI work? The answer should be, well, that shouldn't be a question. It should be something that is proactively provided by whoever is giving you the model. So if IT is giving you that model, let's just say it's Anthropic's Claude model, which is really one of my favorites. That would be one where there needs to be reasoning that's provided part of the model itself when it gives you answers, or the documentation that supports that. Usually the model itself, when it gives you an answer, like if you're talking LLMs, it'll tell you, it'll give you sources for this. It'll tell you and explain the reasoning behind why it told you that you have 26 bank accounts in Australia. And I know that seems like overkill. Like, do I really need reasoning for that? The more complex your questions would be, you would want that reasoning. So that's number two, but we'll decompose that in a moment. Number three, who else sees the AI output? The answer, especially in Treasury, should always be no one else. It should just be you. And when I say you, there's kind of two levels to this. One is your organization. It shouldn't be like all the vendors' customers see this. That's not a good thing. It should be just your organization. And then double down on that. Obviously, there's going to be data privacy, data segregation in place. Like if you're using a treasury system, using an ERP system, not everyone can see everything within your org or within your department. There's separation of duties for a reason, separation of data to support that. This also needs to be respected by the AI. So is it only my data that trains the model? Yeah, it probably should be. I think yes. How does the AI work? That shouldn't be a question I have to ask. This should be proactively answered by the model. And then number three, who else sees the AI output? Shouldn't be anybody else. Every time that there's a conversation, I have a lot of conversations I get pulled into in my role at Kariba. I get pulled into a lot of conversations, oftentimes with chief information security officer, IT teams, project teams, and they're always asking these questions because they want to know with certainty, can I trust this model? Does it align with our organization's AI policy? Put in a slightly different way, is something like this. And again, it's ask and answering in much the same way. Here's the things that you need confidence in. Are there controls that can be independently audited against a certain standard? There is actually an AI standard. It's a bit much for us in Treasury and Finance. It's way more than we would need. But having controls within your SOC 2 Type 2 against that ISO 27001 standard, that's pretty normal. And if whoever you're working with, if they haven't done this, you would at least want them to be down the path of providing this. Is it a private language model? I'm adding the word private just to emphasize the point that we don't want an LLM that is publicly trained. We don't want that insight, and we don't certainly want our questions and hence answers back to us to be decomposed by others that are not part of our organization. So do you need this? My opinion is yes. Is there transparency into the AI reasoning? This should be presented to the user in response to the query, as I've said in the gray column. It's very important. Generally speaking, how can you trust it if you don't know where the answer came from? I sent my 8-year-old off to school today. He has very complex math in grade 3 for some reason. And the one thing I told him is that you need to clearly show your work. Now, in his case, he doesn't print very well, so it's more a messiness thing. But still, if the teacher can't see the work, they can't be sure that you answered the question, understood how it works. Same thing goes here. If you don't see that transparency in words that make sense to you, then you're not going to be confident in the answers. Obviously, only customers' data is used and only customers see the AI output. These, I think, are very, very important points, which I emphasized before. So what is the vendor's responsibility, whoever that vendor is, and that vendor providing AI? I'm going to touch on those where, wait a second, like our IT is the vendor in this case. We'll park that for a second. Where you're using vendors' AI, these are the requirements. This is the responsibility. Every vendor should embrace this. Only your data is used to train the model. There's transparency into the reasoning. Only accredited users in your team can see the outputs, and the controls are tested as part of their annual SOC 2 Type 2 reporting. Absolute minimum opportunity there, or minimum delivery and minimum requirements that you should expect as a treasury professional. So those are generally the important things. Now, let me add one more little wrinkle to this, because so many of you said, well, we actually have these tools that IT gave to us. So 36% of you said, I have my own AI. I can bring my own AI into the equation. How does that work? So let's explain this, because sometimes when I talk about AI, I actually only use this slide. I don't talk about any of the other stuff because most people may know that, or we, question and answer will determine if other slides or information is necessary. This one is always the most important part of the conversation, because when we talk about the reality of AI, there's even a large part of you within this audience that says, well, IT gave us something, which I think is fantastic. And I'm always embrace that. What you need as a Treasury professional is to ensure this right side of the I guess schematic, right side of the slide happens. Number one, IT authorizes AI tools for Treasury. 36% of you said, yep, that's us. 64% not yet, but I'm rooting for you. I think it's a not yet, it's not a not ever. In that scenario, the vendor's responsibility, your Treasury system, your ERP system, whichever analytics system, investment portals, like there's a variety of tools that fit within this category. They need to do one of two things. And it has to be one of these two things. Number one, connect your data warehouse and your AI by an API, or connect their data warehouse to your AI. Let me talk through what seems like something that is almost the same thing, but it's actually quite different. And it's an important distinction that you want to understand for those of you that have AI tools provisioned already by IT, or those that expect to have that at some point. So the concept of data warehouse, we've probably seen this term thrown around, a lot. And really what it comes down to is it's just a giant database. Most organizations have their own. FP&A might have their own, or they might share it with you in Treasury. It'll be tools like Databricks, or Snowflake is actually a really popular one with our clients. I see Snowflake probably more often than anyone else. Not advocating for them, just it's an observation. But Databricks, Snowflake are typically the two most popular ones, but there's lots of others. And if you have a data warehouse, which probably you would, most cases I would expect to see this, that has Treasury information that needs to be put into it so you can run AI off the edge of it. So you might have a ChatGPT enterprise, you might have Dust, you might have Anthropic, you might have Meta. There's a lot, and there's lots of other tools as well. Whatever's been approved by you, approved for you by IT, what your systems need to do is have an API that takes your single source of truth, your Treasury information, your cash information, your banking data, your accounting data, whatever sources that you're looking to put in there. And that API needs to keep that data warehouse in sync. So at any point in time that the data warehouse is up to date. Now, there's a couple different, nuances. One, it could be up to date based on yesterday's information, like prior day banking information as an example, or it could be as of right now. And there's no wrong answer. It's really more a business decision and sometimes maybe a bit of a technical decision in terms of how the tools have been provided to you. But you will have a data warehouse. And in this first option, you will have the AI. And all you want is to make sure that it's up to date with the data so you don't have to figure out how to do it yourself. Like, how do I copy and paste that? Do I have to dump things into Excel and upload them, which sounds horrifying, and I don't wish that upon any of you. But also, number two, more importantly, you want the confidence that whatever data you expect to be in that data warehouse is there. And whatever frequency in terms of updating happens, like, as I said, daily, hourly, by the second, whatever that requirement you have is, that it happens and you don't have to think about it. You don't have to spend time validating that. You know, it just works. That's what you need of your vendor in that first connect your data warehouse and AI via the API. It should be simple, it should be easy, should be something that's very trustable. Now, second one, you have the AI, okay, but you don't have the data warehouse. So you just have an AI tool that said you are allowed to use ChatGPT Enterprise as an example. When I say enterprise, that's the different version than the free version or the pay $20 a month version. Those are not the same things. The enterprise version is much more expensive. It's actually, believe it or not, installed in your own environment. It's not even something that is completely works over the web. That'll change, I'm sure, at some point soon, but that's the reality for how that model works. But there's other models. I'm not advocating one or another. Whatever tool that you were given by IT, you were given the tool, but you weren't given the data warehouse. So most vendors, most providers, most TMS systems, ERP systems, etc., they should all have a data warehouse embedded as a separate tool, like it's a separate service, separate component outside of your daily transaction platform. It's not your database if it's a SQL or it's an Oracle instance or whatever it is that system's running. It's not that. It's not your live data. It's a separate data warehouse that is an extra component or a microservice to get super technical about it. It's a separate thing in terms of what we'll call it normal words. And all you're going to do is say, I'd like to use AI. I don't have the data warehouse or the data lake or the data cabin or whatever terms might be used. I don't have that, but I do have the AI. Can you connect those two together? And that, again, is going to use APIs. You're going to have probably a data warehouse or a data as a service, some sort of offering within, say, SAP or Oracle or Microsoft or NetSuite or your TMS or whatever systems we're talking about. And you're simply just utilizing that as an additional service. The key distinction is you're not using it off live data. It's not production data. You're not slowing things down. You're not having to do any of that. It's a separate data warehouse. It's just maybe embedded within your Treasury platform. So that's what those two things are. I know they sounded really similar, and apologize for that. That's the reality though. And the difference is your data warehouse or not your data warehouse. But either way, you would have brought your own AI that IT authorized you to use, and you would do some of the examples that are in the bottom right of the screen. So if we're all good with that distinction, let's talk about the left side of the screen, embedded AI. This is logically a lot easier to understand. Obviously, I think most of you probably that have read over to that side got it. I mean, I don't probably need to explain the bullet points. I will briefly, but it's pretty straightforward. The AI is within the Treasury platform. It's totally managed by the vendor, and it has to be opt-in because you might not be allowed to use it. I have seen some examples, not us, but I've seen some examples where Treasury systems had not on an opt-in basis, they just had ChatGPT or something like it embedded right in, and you better hope that it meets your security profiles, because if you didn't have or security policy, otherwise you had a bit of a problem. That would be bad. Opting into AI is a deal breaker. Like, you cannot live without that because you don't know that you have permission to use that tool. So on an opt-in basis, totally managed by whoever is providing that platform. It may still be a commercially available model, although most times that open source model, so let's just say Anthropic, their Claude model, or let's say Llama from Meta, i.e. Facebook. Those are examples of open source models that are available. You can subscribe to those, so a vendor can like buy usage of those, and then they will build an AI capability off of that model. And that's typically how it works. So you'll see that there's some vendors in this space that have done things like with OpenAI for ChatGPT, and basically either having it as an accessory on the side or fully embedded in the platform. Others will use some of the other examples that I mentioned. Whatever it is, that trust still, that whole sequence that we talked about in the previous slides still needs to happen. If IT gave you it on the right side of the screen, they've already done that for you. They're not giving you a tool that they haven't vetted. So you can be assured that it's something that meets your organization's AI policy. On the embedded side, you don't know. You don't know, you have to find out. And it's on the vendor to provide that level of disclosure, reporting, compliance, whatever needs to happen. And that may be a very easy process because they've documented their AI policy well. It might be something that requires a lot of conversations to get your IT, your information security, maybe even your legal comfortable that this is a tool that you're provisioned, and I mean, not provisioned, a tool that you are permitted to use. Some examples of those platforms, or not the platforms, of those using those tools embedded would be things such as the ones I talked about: fraud detection, cash forecasting, having an agent builder so you can actually build your own agents and tasks that are performed by AI, being able to just have an LLM embedded within the platform so you can ask it questions, get answers. A lot of those examples that I showed before are supported by embedded AI. The key thing, though, is that you have to be authorized to use it. I can't stress that part enough. That's why that trust gap exists. And it is like, it's not your responsibility to go figure out. It's the vendor's responsibility to prove that they can meet your AI policy. So I know there's a lot baked in there. There might be some questions that come. I am still sharing, Maddie, so I don't have visibility into the questions as they come in, but I would encourage everyone to ask many questions. I'm going to kind of summarize the presentation and answer anything that needs to be answered. So very simply, what we walk through, I talked a little bit about APIs in different parts of the conversation. APIs are foundational. I said in the very first slide of this presentation that APIs really support that data strategy. The data strategy is the base layer. You don't have an AI strategy without a data strategy. Data strategy comes first. APIs are what allow you to drive and empower that data strategy. So they really are the foundation for AI because it allows you to unify data across different systems, across different components, and ultimately have a set of data that you can train AI upon. Yesterday, and I say yesterday, not as a bad thing, not as a, well, don't use it because it's old. Models that were developed figuratively yesterday, but over the past 5-6 years in terms of availability within Treasury, they're very much machine learning oriented because they focus on predictability and data enrichment. They find exceptions or they identify patterns and build predictions of future cash flows and forecasts, or build predictions of this is a payment you really want to have a look at, or this is a trade in terms of hedging that you really want to make. There's a variety of different use cases driven by capabilities with machine learning. Today, right in front of us, we have really, we're like LLMs. We have, ChatGPT and systems like them. That Gen AI category, it really drives knowledge acquisition and engagement through conversation. It allows you to figuratively and actually literally maybe ask your Treasury system a question. And if you work at home, you might do it verbally without actually using a mouse and keyboard. If you are working in an office, you might choose to use the mouse and keyboard just to save your colleagues from you talking or yelling at your Treasury system all the time to give you an answer. And I say that somewhat tongue in cheek, but there's also reality. Most of you that are watching this webinar in the office, you're like, I'm not saying this thing, I'm not asking questions out loud to my Treasury system, and you would be completely understood for doing so. But it definitely, Gen AI is right now. And every system has some level of Gen AI built within it. The key question is, are you allowed to use it? The last part in terms of tomorrow, and in some cases it's actually tomorrow, but let's say figuratively tomorrow, because I want to talk about over the next 6 months, agentic AI will enter the discussion around accessorizing your Treasury systems with an agent-like experience, where it's not just individually for a task here, individually for a task there, but you can actually build a process, a sequence, a workflow. Stitching together is usually the term that's used with agentic AI, but you're sequencing a series of AI-driven tasks, hybrid between what tasks are performed by AI and obviously what would be done by people. And you're creating this agentic experience that allows you to achieve a different level of automation than you have today. So the nice thing about agentic, and I use this phrase intentionally, gives you control over your AI experience. The reason why that's really important is because every single one of you on this webinar, you all have different levels of trust, different policies, different data types, and different practical applications in terms of what AI can do for you and what it shouldn't. Your policies in terms of how you drive Treasury are not the same. So your agentic experience will also not be the same. What AI does and what a human does are going to be different in each of your respective worlds. And as a result, agentic AI, especially with that agent builder experience, is that you are creating the agents that are perfect for you, choosing the agents that might be already available on a platform that are perfect for you, and you are stitching them together in a way that makes sense so the right level of people involvement is reflected in that process or workflow. That is the key thing that agentic really does differently than what we had with just LLMs and chat. So really a nice next level, very excited by that. And in the end, the result is if you collaborate with AI as opposed to being scared of it, if you collaborate with AI, you're going to be the person with AI that ultimately prevails. At some point, it's not today, and it's maybe not tomorrow, but it could easily be in 2026 and certainly beyond that, you're going to find that AI performs level of automation and drives level of productivity for people in Treasury that starts to replace those that do not offer that same level of productivity because they don't have AI. That's a reality. I'm not advocating for it. It's just we know what it looks like. Automation will ultimately create opportunities for those that have it and embrace it to drive further. And for those that don't, to probably not. So it's an opportunity. The nice thing is we can see it. We all see it coming. And there's an easy opportunity to embrace the technology so that we can actually thrive and make more data-driven decisions and be a higher performing treasury operation. So lots of good things to like about it, but definitely embracing this and finding ways within what your organization permits you to do to use AI, finding ways to embrace that and take treasury to the next level is really your opportunity. So with that, I will definitely say thank you for your attention. I wanted to intentionally leave some time for questions if you have them. And certainly I'll answer away, Maddie, if there's anything there that has already been posted.